All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. We have two special guests. We have Landis Smith. She's the Guidelines for Collaboration Coordinator with Indian Art Research Center out of the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe. She's also a projects conservator at the Museums of New Mexico Conservation Lab in Santa Fe, at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, and a research associate at the National Museum of American Indian at Smithsonian. And then we have Miss Alyssa Poon, Director of Indian Arts Research Center, School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe. So Ms. Smith and Ms. Poon, just to give you some background, PEAK is a nonprofit that runs the Los Alamos Nature Center. We started the Land Acknowledgement Committee around 6 months ago, and we meet once a month to discuss land acknowledgements, the how, the why, and how to build better connections with and honor Indigenous community members and neighbors. The committee grew from just the PEAK staff to include other organizations in Los Alamos County, such as the Fuller Lodge Arts Center, Los Alamos Public Schools, Los Alamos Public Library, the Unitarian Church, and the Vials Caldera. We've been working on appropriate and respectful verbiage for our land acknowledgements, and also brainstorming ways to educate and connect with our community. Some of us already have relationships that we've been working on over the years, and for some of the organizations that hop on, it's a new process. In the past, we've had guest speakers that include Ethan Ortega, Regional Manager for the New Mexico Historic Site at Los Luceros, and Dr. Asata Zarari. She serves as the Vice President for Equity and Inclusion and Professor of Sociology at the University of New Mexico, and Pamela Agoyo, Director and Special Assistant to the President of Indian Affairs at UNM, and Director of American Indian Student Services. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing. I think what we'll do is we'll go around and give a quick introduction so you know who's here. And then if it's okay with you two, I can turn the meeting over to you both, and any guidance or advice or suggestions that you have to share would be appreciated. And we're just open to learn and grow and hear what you have to say. And then at the end, we can open it up for like questions and answers. But since it's such a small group today, we can just kind of see how it goes. I'm Krista Tyson. I'm the Visitor Services Manager with PEAK. And Katie, you're up.
I'm Katie Brule, and I am the Director at PEAK.
And Kristen, please.
My name is Kristen O'Hara, and I'm the Director of Interpretation at PEAK.
Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Landman, and I'm the Marketing Manager at PEAK.
Miss Jacqueline.
Hi, I am a contractor to Los Amigos de Valle Caldera, the Friends group that manages the park store at the Caldera, and a community member.
Landis Smith, is there anything you would like to share on top of the introduction I gave?
No, I'm curious what you're thinking about though. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'm curious what you all are thinking about doing. Is there any sort of other thoughts or percolating about what you might do?
Landis, your sound is kind of flipping in and out.
Do you mean what we might do in terms of a land acknowledgement, how we might use it, or just more in general?
What you might do beyond that.
Beyond that. So, I mean, right now we partner fairly extensively with the Capo Community School at Santa Clara. And that's a relationship that we've been building for many years, and it's mostly our education department that spearheads that. But this past year, while schools were closed, we worked with the kids, and mostly their teachers did the work, but we were part of it to develop a kids nature guide, which is on our website. The English version is on our website, but the Tewa version they are using internally. So that's really cute. And we have plans for next year to do field trips into Santa Clara Canyon, working with local experts there. So that kind of thing. I think that's our biggest collaboration, but we have other small partnerships as well.
Ms. Poon, is there anything else you would like to share regarding your introduction?
No, I don't think so. I guess I could add, our programs at the Indian Arts Research Center have been largely community-based for the last 10 or 15 years. We still have a lot of work to do, of course, but we're happy to share any of our processes and relationships and help to build relationships as we are able. I'm curious as to kind of what I've kind of read through your guys's the notes and so forth that you've put into the Zoom invite and so forth, but I am curious kind of just to hear from you guys, what are your goals ultimately for this process? Are there kind of more concrete things that you are looking to work on, to build upon, things like that?
I would say for us, this idea of doing a land acknowledgement came up, and we definitely want to do it, but we don't want it to be just an empty gesture, right? We don't want just to be virtue signaling or whatever. So at the same time, we have certain things that we can offer to the tribes and pueblos, like Rachel does an amazing job with marketing. So if they have events they, want to share, that I feel like that's one of our strengths that we could help. But maybe the tribes and pueblos don't want or need anything from us. Maybe they don't want to partner with us or collaborate with us on anything. And that's perfectly valid as well. So I think for us, the challenge is sort of figuring out who to connect with respectfully to find out, like, is there even any, like, do you even have any interest in doing anything with us? And if not, fine. If yes, great, here are some ideas we have, but we want to hear what your ideas are. And, so at this point, we're pretty open. I feel like besides the marketing, the other things we have to offer are like, we give talks and presentations when we have events that people come to. So, we would definitely invite people to give those talks or be at those events, however they would want to do that. We have exhibits in the Nature Center. Kristen is looking at redoing those exhibits at some point, and having other viewpoints from the tribes and pueblos into the creation of those exhibits would be amazing. For me personally, that's where I feel like we are, but other peak people feel free to jump in.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot and have done a lot. I'm not, I think we're a little preaching to the choir here today, but in some of in this little PowerPoint, I sort of got together maybe too rudimentary for you guys at this point, but I didn't quite know what to expect. So we can just sort of rush through it and then talk. So I just thought I would talk briefly about how the guidelines came to be. It was, really started around 2012 as I was thinking about returning to New Mexico after being in DC for over a decade. There was all this collaborative work going on in different museums, but everybody had a different idea about what collaboration was. It varied from institution to institution and even from one staff member to the next. So it seemed like a really great sort of an opportune moment for a gathering of museum professionals to talk about where we are with this work and where we're going. So the School for Advanced Research is known for gathering people around ideas and then seeing where it goes. So I approached Cynthia Chavez Lamar, who was director at the time, about it, and it was in alignment with the work she was doing, and found support for it. So we had a bunch of meetings over almost 4 years, different groups of people, but with a core group of about 9. We met, this is a goofy picture, just mostly at the School for Advanced Research. We had a giant workshop at Acoma Pueblo with it included a real sort of wide variety of people, all giving input and helping us with the guidelines. Another one at the school. And then we would also have small editing sessions at NMAI. So finally, we had a set of guidelines that we could post. And these guidelines are based on some underlying principles. I just made this very short, you guys. So as you know, I'm sure already, that building trust is what it's all about, sort of the foundation of all of our collaborative work. But how do you do that? Well, and again, this is probably something you already know, but hospitality is just so important in creating that welcoming environment. You know, arranging for a social time before diving into work is important. Getting to know one another, offering a tour, orientation, going over the agenda and seeking input, planning breaks, coffee, snacks, etc., and ensure that people will not be exposed to human remains, burial items, or images of burials or human remains. Again, you already know this, mutual respect is at the core of collaborative work. Respecting a traditional knowledge is on par with Western scholarship. Respecting cultural boundaries, that, you know, we can't know everything and we shouldn't. Maybe asking a question and getting no answer is like, that's your answer. There are limitations to what people can share, but we can share skills and expertise in certain areas. This is Potter Ulysses Reed from ZIAC, who brought his pot that he made right here to the lab because he wanted to learn how to stabilize cracks. So this is conservator Larry Metua teaching Ulysses how. Again, this is a very popular activity I find with artists in general, is looking at the pots under UV light, because it sort of reveals any old restorations, over paint, and can identify the type of adhesive was used. This is Eric Fender again from San Ildefonso Pueblo. One of the things that I think is so important is having sort of free range in the storage area to sort of peruse the aisles and see what's there from its community. And we learned a lot by doing that with Eric, because he spotted this pot, and it's always been sort of mysterious to the museum, you know, sort of what was this thing? It looked like a Mexican pot, but had San Ildefonso painting on it. And Eric said that as a child, he had always heard about this beer pot, and this is it. It was from fermenting beer, and there's all kinds of evidence of that process in the clay. This, let's see, can't see it. Same with this popcorn pot. Again, it had a condition issue that was very unusual, and he immediately recognized that it had been used to parch corn in a fire. Another thing that we do is bring collections out to communities. So this is at the Navajo Reservation. It's a chapter house senior center. And we brought silver from the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture out there for people to talk about, look at, give us advice as to how they wanted their cultural heritage presented in the museum. So this is one of my favorite photos. Alicia knows, I'm sure. These are 3 former Oya maidens. You see them as Oya maidens. Sort of assessing the pottery at the Indian Arts Research Center at the School for Advanced Research. Apparently they had been left alone in the room to sketch designs and so forth for inspiration for their own pots. And when the collections manager came back in, they were oil maidens with the pots on their heads. And that my hat's off to that collections manager for having the wherewithal to take a picture at that moment. That's really all there is.
Could you scroll back to the website that you shared? Because I actually don't think I have seen the guideline. It's the guidelines for collaboration website. I thought you were referring to another website when you asked.
Okay, it's I could tell you because I've got some weird thing on my screen now, which I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
put it in the chat.
Oh yeah, can you do that, Alicia? Thanks.
Yeah, so the guidelines for information are available on our website. We also do have a printed booklet that is available, but it's most easily accessible and fullest on the website. You can also access a number of case studies on our website from various museums and communities, instances of different projects where communities and museums were working together. Again, this one is very museum focused, so just be aware, but I think there are a lot of transferable information that is about developing relationships with communities and assisting communities to develop relationships with museums in a way that is on their own terms. I think Landis brings a really good point about a lot of this is about trust and long-term relationships. So oftentimes developing these relationships not only takes years, but sometimes decades to develop that trust, to work together. It sounds like you guys already have a really beautiful project with Capo, which is fantastic to hear about and see. My husband and his family are from there, so it's nice to see such impact within the community. I think as you guys move forward with incorporating, their own ideas and so forth and input into your own exhibits and so forth, I guess maybe this is a good point to share my own experience right now with one of our projects that we're currently working on, which is an exhibit called Grounded in Clay. We just changed the title, so it's Grounded in Clay, the Spirit of Pueblo Pottery. It's been a learning experience for us. We decided at the 100th anniversary of our collections to create an exhibit. We're typically a non-exhibiting institution, actually. We're a research collection primarily. But we decided for 100th anniversary, we would do an exhibit and got support to do so. But rather than having a single curator focus, we decided to open it up to community. And in fact, we have 65 participants spanning all 19 Rio Grande Pueblos, the Isleta del Sur, and Hopi. So there are 21 communities represented. And the Puro Manso Tiwa community as well, which is unfederally recognized in New Mexico. And we wanted to bring together the group of them to figure out, where does Pueblo pottery stand now? What does Pueblo pottery mean to Pueblo people? And we decided to go kind of on a backwards process. Most exhibits, you kind of figure out what themes you're going to work on, what things you want to cover. And this process, we decided to wait until wait for everyone to pick their own pieces within the exhibit, for us to not give any direction really, aside from, okay, we're going to focus on the larger theme of pottery because you have to start somewhere, and see where it went, and to kind of meet people where they were. They were asked to do catalog entries. They could pick from 1 to 2 pieces and then write some sort of narrative about those pieces. And then from there, we would take that information, and that information that turned up in the catalog would then in turn inform the exhibit themselves. And this is a little, I think there's a lot of different processes that can inform and develop, shape collaborative projects. I think for us, it was really important that people had their own kind of individual little pods to work within and their own ideas of interpretation. Because I'm sure if you've worked in larger groups before, you know that's oftentimes certain voices dominate over others, you know, for whatever, a number of reasons. And so we felt that it was, in this particular project, really important to give everyone their individual voices and then see where everyone collectively met in that sense. And then, so in addition to that, we also had points where people could come together and still work as an entire group to form these ideas. For example, when we realized that the title we had developed was just a working title. We just needed something to, you know, name it for a while. But when it came down to the catalog and the exhibit, we realized we had to like actually buckle down and come up with a title. And we, you know, had people submit names and vote on it. And so they were involved at that detailed level. The publisher for the catalog has asked for a map. And so we had to go back to the entire group and ask them, well, what is appropriate for a map? And this is something that may come up with you guys as well. You know, this idea of space and location, especially if you're thinking about land acknowledgements, who gets acknowledged, what communities are important for this project, what ancestral sites need to be listed, what cultural groups need to be listed for that particular project. And it hadn't really occurred to us, but you know, different projects require different maps. And we also had to figure out, do we acknowledge where the contributors were from, or the communities that the objects that had been picked were coming from, because those were in some cases two different things. So these were all kind of topics that we realized that it was best done as a group. So I think in this process, we've realized there are some things that it's important to acknowledge those individual voices and also to acknowledge them as a group. Both things are really essential. As we move into the exhibit design process, one thing we realize is communication is extremely important. And even if you think like taking notes or not getting, you know, maybe it takes a while to get those minutes out, those things are actually really important. And even if they're not reading it super clearly, like them knowing that you've taken the time to take down all the notes from the meeting and send it to them in a timely manner within a few days, that means a lot. That means that you have made that effort to communicate to them, because not everyone can come to all the meetings, as you know, we've witnessed today, and not everyone can make every gathering there is, but they, you know, whether or not they express it or not, a lot of people still want to be engaged and want to know what's happening. And I think that's, you know, that communication is really part of that trust factor. And I think a lot of people don't really put a lot of stock in the administrative aspects of communication, that it does take like a lot of organization and a lot of taking notes and a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls, and that some people don't have emails and that you have to call them and sit there and relay all this information to them. And that's okay, because, you know, that will help people appreciate that, and that helps build that that trust aspect, that you're not leaving any one person behind in the process just because they haven't gotten back to you or can't participate on the Zoom or don't have the technological access to participate in the way that, you know, some of us might prefer to participate. Landis, feel free to jump in at any time if you have anything to add to these kind of points as, you know, we move through this project that we are currently working on. Going back to the exhibit design, obviously you can't like have 65 people's ideas all represented in an exhibit. It just doesn't work that way. But explaining to them what exhibit design is versus the curatorial process, those are two different things, is really important. And explaining to them what is possible and giving them an opportunity to express, well, is this possible, you know, to give ideas or to give what the exhibit designers are looking for. Like oftentimes they're looking for your big what are your big takeaways from the exhibit, right? What do you want the feel for the exhibit to be? And let them, think through that as a group. What we ended up doing is providing everyone's catalog entry to everybody, and ask them, read through this, read through all your colleagues and all of your families' entries, and what are the things that stick out. And so that was one way we figured out to approach that. So I'm sharing this because, you mentioned kind of like this idea of, possibly including community voices and.
Yeah, and Alicia, I think you're touching on something important, and that is to getting people to lead the conversation, that you're not sort of asking leading questions and so forth too much. The shift in power, that shift in authority can happen during that process, and allowing people to lead the discussion, to choose what they want to talk about, because that can also be an important indicator of value and significance and so forth. So I always feel like it's a success when I'm following them around, and not the opposite.
Yeah, I think it's always it's important also to understand your role as facilitators and not as leaders per se. And in a role of facilitator, to come through with a plan, because sometimes, they're not coming in with specific ideas right away, but as the conversation kind of develops, sometimes it kind of shifts. And to be able to be flexible with that. And I guess that's the next point is, flexibility, right? And also flexibility within reason, understanding when there are just certain technical parameters that can't make something happen, or being able to negotiate something that makes everyone happy, For example, we were working on a project with San Felipe who wanted to help revive their pottery tradition within their community. And at first they were wanting to publish a book, but this was, for those of you who've worked in the publishing industry, realize that the access to those books and the amount of money it costs to publish those books and the relatively few copies that those books end up selling sometimes doesn't lend itself to easy access. And so we worked with them to discuss other possibilities. And we could have still done a publishing if that was really pushed hard, but we kind of looked through and kind of looked at the numbers and decided as a group that maybe having some sort of pop-up exhibit that could go into other communities and something on a website could reach more people ultimately and could be more flexible. And I think being able to have those discussions is really important. But of course, being able to have the discussions, what underlies all of that is developing those relationships in the first place, right?
You guys, are you involving people in interpretation of or information about animals and plants and so forth? Is that part of your plan or what you're doing already?
So my plan is very foundational right now. It's just sort of thinking through, I don't know, how we can change and how we can incorporate community voices in the exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
And it was established, the exhibits were established a while ago, and we did involve community members from Los Alamos.
Mm-hmm.
But I would really love to incorporate, surrounding communities as well. And I guess my question while you were talking was, we have a fairly decent relationship with Santa Clara Pueblo, but it's when those connections with the other surrounding Pueblo groups are where I'm sort of like, where do I even start? So because I honestly have so many ideas that I just want to hear input about them. But yeah, where's the starting point?
I think, I mean, personally, Alicia, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer can sometimes be super helpful if there's any kind of community center or tribal museum. That is also a great place to go. Also, just by networking, like call us. You know, we can give you some names maybe to start with, right?
Who are you working with at Couple Community School?
Katie
You know,
knows that a little bit more.
None of us here are educators, so. I don't
Diane
Oh.
Chavaria, I think,
Diane
is the
Chavaria,
main.
yeah, and
Okay, that is my sister-in-law.
she's awesome.
That's so
She's been so
funny.
great.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so her husband is the TIPO. So I would contact Diane and say, hey, you know, we want to expand, and you start with who you know and talk with Diane and say, hey, we want to expand and work with some of the other community schools and also get input from other tribes. And you can say, I understand your husband is the TIPO. Do you think you can put us in contact with him? His name is Ben. And we'd love to, have a meeting with him and just have an opportunity to present some of his ideas and get some of his input on what might be important. I think that's a great start. You can mention my name and just tell her that Alicia suggested maybe this might be a process to like the direction to go in, and just request a meeting with Ben to have if it would be okay to have the opportunity to present what some of the goals are, so that we can, like, you guys can better serve, a couple, and also maybe begin to provide services and incorporate the voices of the surrounding communities, with San Ildefonso being so close, that's probably an obvious kind of next start to go with. Myron Gonzalez is someone that works very closely with Bandolier, actually, and NPS, and he would be someone to connect with in terms of trying to develop. He works heavily with the Youth Corps. We just hosted them in Santa Fe recently, and I can put you in touch with them.
I get that person's contact information too.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
read an article about him very recently, and he seems like a real dynamo. So it'd be great to speak with him.
Yeah, and just say, like, this is kind of what we are moving toward. Can I come to you and, like, can I share what we have? And we'd like some input about how we can better serve your community, and we'd love to incorporate your perspectives within our institution, so more people can understand better about this area.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
I think one of my favorite projects of all time was bringing the Yupik people into birds and mammal collections at Natural History in DC. I mean, they were singing wolf songs, in storage, just very excited to see the birds and the animals, and sharing with us all these sort of stories about the birds and their experiences with them. It's really rich and dynamic. I'm jealous that you get to do that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Those are great starts.
For sharing of information, if you would like to send that contact information, reply to my email, then I can share it in notes with the whole group, if that's the easiest way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'll check in with Myron. He does have a cell phone number, does not have voicemail in that cell phone number, so it's often hard. His best contact is actually Facebook. So I can share his Facebook address with you guys and just give him a heads up. Yeah, so that's the other part. It's like, you know, sometimes you just have to meet people and just have where they are with technology and access. And it's, I tend to work a lot with visual artists, just the nature of what I do, and a lot of artists, which Myron is, are very accessible on Facebook and nowhere else. So
Good to know.
yeah, sometimes it's just understanding like where they are accessible. Myron doesn't check his email, doesn't have voicemail, or hasn't set it up or something. I don't know what it is, but he's great on Facebook, you know, so.
He's a really good teacher too, I think, Myron. Yeah,
Myron's a great teacher.
he brought a group to Isabel, his
Mom.
mom, yeah, to their house, and he was just outstanding and inspiring as a teacher. So I highly recommend Myron.
I think he gave a talk for us a few years ago with someone else at Bandelier, and he was wonderful. So
Yeah.
reestablishing that connection would be great.
I have a quick question. I know you guys talked about a lot of like behind the scenes collaboration, which is something that we're working on as well. Have you guys ever had like a panel of speakers that you worked with that you opened up to the community? Maybe had a talk that others were welcome to join?
Yeah. But so with the San Felipe kind of pottery project that we worked on, the seminars themselves were always closed to the public, and that was to be able to keep those conversations confidential. That was part of the trust process, that not everything that was being shared would be used, and to acknowledge that they would have control over what got shared. However, with our seminar projects with SAR, of which the pottery project was one, there is always an external output. And so we asked them, you know, what do you want from this project, you know? And of course, at first they kind of looked at us like, well, I don't know, you brought us here, you know? Even though there was a request to start it, it was like, you know, we were inviting them there. Like, well, what do you want? And they eventually started, we ended up doing the online exhibit. We had the banner exhibit, but we also ended up doing the first ever San Felipe pottery public show during Indian Market. And we also did a community celebration at San Felipe, but that was open to the general public as a whole. And we advertised in like the Alibi, the weekly Alibi, and the Reporter, I think, to draw in people from the outside, to bring in the public community into the Pueblo itself. And then we worked with the community. In this case, we worked with, of course, the potters that we were working with the project, but they connected us to the principal of their Head Start and organize the event around there. And we're able to also organize internal workshops for the Head Start kids, but the public facing part was the community celebration. And so we kind of figured out what their goals were for the public, and then try to kind of back into like what type of programming would be appropriate for that. Does that help?
Oh, sorry.
Did that answer your question, Krista?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
I mean, every group is different, and working with, let's say, Yupik people from Alaska, you know, had a different sort of perspective on public programs. Like, they want to get out there and educate people as much as possible, and are open to sharing. So we did these public programs with Yupik advisors in DC, and they were open to the public, and it was basically conversations about what was in the collections. So it was like a public collaboration in a way. But it was very successful and very popular. You'd have to be a little bit more careful here, I think, than, but it's a basic, you know, what do you want to say about this object for the public to hear from you about these things directly?
Can I ask a question? My internet died, so I don't know if this was covered before, but it seems like those of, you know, the institutions that have collections, you have sort of an easy bridge towards collaboration. For us, we don't have that. And I don't know if you have any suggestions on sort of forming partnerships or collaborations when you don't have that collection as a bridge.
I literally just asked that.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have collections, but you have this world around you that is shared. And I think that is a very powerful connection. There are different lenses in which to see what the roles of animals and trees and other things are. And those objects in our collection serve the same purpose. You know, they have different roles. For example, for us, it's, you know, some of these pots might have been traded to come into the tourist industry, but for the community, that same pot might have an entirely different purpose that is beyond just sitting on a shelf, right? And for us, you know, interacting with trout or something might be, you know, it's a fishing opportunity, but it might mean something more within the community. And understanding that there are multiple layers of interpretation for everything that surrounds us, I think, is one way to approach it, right?
Hunting
I think,
sorry,
go
go
on.
ahead, Alicia.
I think how we, go on, you go first.
I was just going to say hunting and fishing is a whole other world that, you know, how things were hunted and why, and the tools that were used, fish traps, you know, their design, what they were made of.
Land management.
Yeah, all of those things would be so interesting to look into from your point, from your institution. Yeah.
And land management, wildlife management, these are all things that are important to the tribes. And, you know, talking about that history, the importance of it, but also acknowledging that there are limitations and boundaries, and to be okay with respecting those boundaries, that there are just certain things that can't be talked about. I think there's ways to bring in, like, if you want to bring in the arts a little bit, a lot of the pottery and the textiles and that feature so heavily within our physical collection also reflect the environment. They reflect things like rain and thunder and agriculture and bears and things that bring rain. You know, rain is so important in this area because it's dry, right? But because it's so important, it's also a sacred thing, and that figures heavily into the cultures, you know, that surround us. But it figures heavily into our lives, our everyday lives of everyone in general, right? With water conservation and how it's the power of water is harnessed. I think those are all broad options that can be talked about and explored.
It was also interesting talking to these Yupik people. You know, they would see a bird in the collection and say, well, these used to be covering this area and are no longer seen. I mean, there's like really interesting sort of changes, global changes and environmental changes that have been observed by people.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? I know that I've learned a lot, and I really enjoyed the path that this conversation took. In a lot of our previous meetings, we talked more about like how to word the land acknowledgement and who to reach out to. But I feel like this meeting has really like been fun in thinking forward about how can we use this in some of our exhibits on site and continue with those connections. So
And you
That's
know,
really inspiring. Thank you so much.
I,
Really.
I love this sort of work, and what you might be able to do. So please, feel free to call, communicate with us,
Yeah, we're happy to help or,
Yeah.
make connections in any way that we can.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just want to say what Krista said, but I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, and it definitely diverged from where I thought the meeting was going to be. And it's funny because it really coincides with some things I'm being asked to do at the park that I've had some discomfort. And now I feel like I have some resources about how I might address those issues and how we might collaborate and begin some community engagement, which is really important for the Caldera. It's really struggled to have.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have, we recently put together a COVID relief program about, several months back to support some of our artist fellows. And one of the awards we granted was to Kathleen Wall, who is actually working, she's from Jemez Pueblo. And, she herself was just learning about some of the land types of, historic kind of conflicts, around land and water and space with the Valles Caldera. And it's something that she's been really wanting to explore as her husband is governor. And, as she's been learning more about, what are these issues, she's been really curious about creating art and developing work around the Caldera. So, if she's someone that you are interested in reaching out to at some point, I'm happy to make that connection.
Yes, please. Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
And I'd also like to offer an invitation. If you're ever in Los Alamos and you want to come see the Nature Center, I'd be more than happy to show you around, give you a tour, show you the planetarium. And it would be fun to show you our exhibit space, although it's much smaller than what you're working with. But the building is beautiful and it's right on the canyon. You can see the mountains and
I've been there a few times actually when we're, typically non-pandemic times, we're typically based in Santa Clara, and it's a beautiful space and I very much enjoy Peak and its program. So thank you for doing what you do for the community.
When does your exhibit open, the one that you're currently working on?
Yeah, it opens in late July 2022 at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. Then it's actually going to be a traveling exhibit. We felt that it was really important for people to be able to see Pueblo pottery and voices within art spaces as well, because this type of interpretation and community collaboration often doesn't happen sometimes at the high level of art museums. And so it's going to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City afterward, in a two-part exhibition with the Vilczek Foundation of New York. And then we're hoping to travel it to a few other places around the country as well.
Wow, that's incredible. Very
Mhm.
good.
good job.
Yeah, really impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. And it was wonderful to meet you both. And
Great meeting you all.
yes, thank you
Have,
so
Thank
have
you.
fun. Have fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, so Krista, if you want to pass on Landis and my contact information to everyone, that would be completely fine. I will get you the contact information for those folks or the names. And yeah, let me know if there's anything else we can do for you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Been wonderful.